And that was in 2020. And as hard as it is to appreciate or understand why the decision was made the way that it was in 2020.
Prince Harry was once the royal family's golden boy, the vibrant, unpredictable, yet beloved son who brought life to the monarchy's rigid image. But now, he's become the man who shattered the very silence that held the crown together. His words weren't just emotional, they were explosive. In a move that stunned both supporters and critics alike, Harry exposed what he claims to be the royal family's darkest secret, a long-hidden health issue involving King Charles himself. A waiting fee, secret so closely guarded that even those within the palace didn't fully understand the depth of what was unfolding behind closed doors. According to Harry, this wasn't just about a father's illness, it was about deception, denial, and a carefully staged cover-up. This bombshell didn't just rattle palace walls, it struck at the core of royal tradition. The monarchy has always survived by maintaining mystery, by protecting its members from public scrutiny. But Harry, from a new life across the ocean, broke every unspoken rule. He turned away from the family motto of never complain, never explain, and made the private public. And now the world is asking why. Why reveal this now, when King Charles is at his most vulnerable? Why disrupt the very foundation of an institution he was born into? Some say it's vengeance. Others call it a cry for healing. But whatever the motive, the impact is undeniable. This isn't just family drama. It's a threat to the image of continuity and strength that the monarchy relies on. For the first time in modern history, a royal insider is accusing the palace of actively hiding the truth about the head of state's condition. If the allegations are true, then what the public has seen of King Charles, his speeches, his smiles, his engagements, may have been a carefully choreographed illusion. Harry didn't stop at vague statements or subtle suggestions. He laid out the details. Moments of confusion, erratic behavior, fatigue, and missed appointments explained away as mere scheduling conflicts. But according to him, it was all part of a bigger lie. A lie that weighed not only on his father's image, but on Harry's own conscience. And so, he broke the silence. This was more than just a revelation. It was a rupture, a breaking point between a father and son who once shared a closeness that defied royal expectations. A bond that had weathered grief, loss, and global scrutiny. But even the strongest ties can fray when truth is buried beneath protocol. And Harry's decision to speak wasn't made in haste. It was forged over years of silence, of unanswered calls, of watching history repeat itself. He saw shadows of his mother's struggles reflected in Meghan's battles. He saw a system that protected the institution, not the individuals, and he couldn't stay quiet any longer. But to understand why Harry did this, we must first go back to a time when father and son were inseparable. Before the headlines, before the accusations and the silence, there was love, and not the royal kind, not ceremonial, distant, or cold, but something raw and deeply human. After the world lost Princess Diana in 1997, a 12-year-old boy was left staring into the void of unimaginable grief. And in that moment, it was Charles who stepped in, not as the heir to the throne, but as a father navigating heartbreak himself. He didn't know all the right words, and he couldn't fill the hole Diana left behind. But he tried. Quiet walks in the palace gardens, long drives outside of London, soft reassurance behind closed doors, these weren't grand gestures meant for cameras. They were acts of comfort from a man who understood that his youngest son wasn't just mourning a mother, but losing a sense of safety. In the years that followed, Charles became more than a parent. He was a mentor, a protector, a guide. When Harry made the decision to join the military, it wasn't met with disapproval. Instead, it was supported with pride. Charles stood behind his son's choice, even as the weight of danger became real. And when Harry deployed to Afghanistan, Charles didn't just send letters or public statements. He made time to visit, keeping their bond intact even across the miles and chaos of war. There was no press release for the emotions that passed between them during those moments. It was a father's pride, carved into silence. Even when Harry returned home and faced the challenges of living under constant scrutiny, Charles remained steady, he wasn't always expressive. His love was shown in action, not affection. But for Harry, that was enough. Because underneath the titles and tradition, Charles was the one person who never wavered, the one who listened, the one who stayed. And that quiet strength was never more evident than during Harry's wedding to Meghan Markle in 2018. Meghan's father was absent, the world watching and waiting to judge. But Charles didn't hesitate. He walked her down the aisle, not out of duty, but out of love for his son. That moment, captured and shared around the globe, wasn't just about bridging families. It was about showing Harry that his happiness mattered. That no matter what, Charles would be there. Behind the walls of the palace, their relationship was rooted in late-night conversations talks that often circled back to Diana. Her laughter, her compassion, her flaws, her strength. Those talks weren't rehearsed or filtered. They were moments of vulnerability between a father and son still grieving, still healing. And in that shared pain, they built trust. Not the kind demanded by royalty, but one formed in the absence of a mother who once held them together. In those years, the bond seemed unbreakable. But time has a way of testing even the deepest foundations. And when pressure mounts, even love can begin to bend. Because even the strongest relationships can crumble, especially when love collides with duty. When Meghan Markle entered the royal spotlight, it wasn't just another love story, it was a collision course with history. She was everything the palace wasn't prepared for. Biracial, bold, accomplished, and completely unafraid to speak her mind. The moment she stood beside Harry, smiling with confidence and unfiltered authenticity, the foundations of royal tradition began to tremble. Meghan wasn't born into blue blood. She wasn't raised for crowns or protocol, but her presence, her power, and her passion would become the trigger for the monarchy's deepest internal fracture. At first, the palace tried to pretend it could adapt. Charles welcomed her publicly, even walking her down the aisle at her wedding, when her own father couldn't. It was a gesture the world applauded, warm, supportive, even redemptive. But behind those palace doors, unease spread like wildfire. Meghan's independence wasn't something they could manage. She didn't fit the silent, compliant mold that had shaped royal women for decades. She had a voice, and she used it. She had a past, and she didn't hide it. And that, in royal circles, was dangerous. Then the media storm hit. And this time, it wasn't just paparazzi chasing headlines, it was character assassination dressed in tabloid ink. Day after day, Meghan was painted as difficult, demanding, and divisive. Stories twisted her ambition into arrogance, her strength into threats. Harry watched in horror as the same press that once stalked his mother now turned its sights on his wife. He waited for the palace to step in, to protect Meghan like it once shielded others. But what he heard instead was silence. Deafening silence. That silence turned into bitterness. Harry had grown up believing his family would always protect its own. But now, he felt abandoned, betrayed. Charles, who once stood as his closest ally, didn't push back against the headlines. He didn't publicly defend Meghan. And that absence spoke louder than words. The bond between father and son, once built on shared pain and deep understanding, began to unravel under the weight of unspoken disappointments. To Harry, it felt like watching history repeat itself. The harsh scrutiny, the emotional isolation, the unspoken rule that survival meant silence, it all echoed the life his mother endured. And just like Diana, Meghan was being swallowed by the expectations of an institution that prized image over humanity. Harry couldn't ignore the parallels anymore. Meghan had become Diana 2.0, and the firm, the establishment that was supposed to support them, had become the enemy. What began as a fairy tale had morphed into a political and personal battlefield, and Harry wasn't just protecting his wife. He was defending the legacy of the woman who once tried to break free from the same chains. Then came the moment that would burn bridges not just with the media, but within the family itself. They didn't just walk away from the crown. They walked away from family, and they didn't look back. When Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back from royal duties in early 2020, it wasn't a quiet transition. It was a rupture loud, deliberate, and undeniably final. the announcement didn't come through a palace statement. It came through social media. And the message was clear. They were done playing by the rules of a system they no longer trusted. The move sent shockwaves through the monarchy, blindsiding not only the public, but the very institution that raised Harry. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere turned cold. Behind the polished press releases and carefully worded responses, there was disbelief, confusion, and a growing sense of betrayal. Charles, who had once embraced Meghan with open arms and supported Harry's military ambitions, reportedly felt humiliated. His son, the boy he protected through Diana's death, the man he supported through war and love, had now chosen to turn away without so much as a warning. Behind palace doors, he wasn't just a disappointed father. He was a wounded king in waiting, left scrambling to understand how the bond he thought was unbreakable had been quietly severed. But the real fracture was yet to come. When Harry and Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey, the curtain that had always shielded the royal family was torn wide open. For the first time, raw emotion and buried pain spilled into the public sphere. Harry spoke not as a prince, but as a son who felt abandoned, a husband who felt unprotected, and a man who had seen too much silence masquerade as strength. Meghan revealed the depth of her isolation and despair, sparking a global reckoning about race, mental health, and monarchy. The world watched in disbelief as the House of Windsor was brought to its knees not by foreign enemies, but by one of its own. For Charles, the fallout was brutal. The allegations were personal. The insinuation that he ignored his son's pain cut deeper than any headline. And, the worst part? He had no public response. The institution's rigid code of silence, never complain, never explain, left him paralyzed. His image was carefully preserved, but the man beneath the crown remained silent. And in that silence, something precious died. Trust. What followed was a collapse, not just of communication, but of connection. Reunions were missed. Calls were unanswered. Messages left hanging. During funerals, public appearances, and brief visits, the warmth that once defined Harry and Charles's relationship had vanished. In its place was tension, stiffness, and a distance that no amount of protocol could disguise. The royal family may have appeared unified on the outside, but behind the scenes, the emotional fracture widened with every passing day. And for Harry, that fracture was more than painful, it was dangerous. Because silence wasn't just a sign of rejection, it was a pattern, a cycle, one that had already destroyed his mother, and now threatened to consume his own family. And that's when he made the decision to speak the truth, to pull back the curtain, to reveal what no royal ever dared. Hidden documents, cancelled appearances, a failing memory. Prince Harry says the palace has been lying for years. And this time, it's not about royal titles or family feuds, it's about something far more serious. Something that strikes at the very core of leadership and trust. In a shocking turn, Harry claims that King Charles has been secretly battling a long-term health condition. Not a passing illness, not an injury hidden by royal protocol, but a persistent, worsening issue that affects memory, mood, and energy. And for years, the public has seen only what the palace wanted them to see. Behind the royal smiles and waving hands was a carefully orchestrated illusion. According to Harry, this wasn't a one-time cover-up, it was a system. One designed by aides, doctors, and inner circle advisors who shaped every public appearance with chilling precision. If Charles was too fatigued for a speech, they rescheduled. If his memory faltered, they handed him shorter scripts. If he was too unwell to travel, they blamed the weather. And to the public, everything seemed under control. But inside the palace, it was chaos disguised as control. Harry says he didn't uncover this truth all at once. It came in fragments, slipped conversations, quiet confusion, moments where his father's focus would drift, or where decisions seemed delayed without reason. But the final crack came when Harry discovered internal notes left behind by staff-written records of cancelled engagements, backroom discussions about Charles's deteriorating condition, and contingency plans that masked reality with crafted narratives. One note spoke of a pre-recorded video being used in place of a live appearance, just in case the king was unable to speak clearly. Another referenced a fabricated excuse for why a long-planned visit to a hospital was abruptly cancelled. To Harry, these weren't just logistical notes, they were proof. Proof that the monarchy was willing to deceive the public, not for privacy, but for preservation. And it cut deep, because beneath the headline was something personal. Harry had offered to help. He had asked questions. He had tried to reconnect with his father, only to be met with denial, avoidance, and silence. He wasn't just excluded from royal life. He was shut out from the truth. A son, desperate to understand his father's pain, left watching from the outside as the institution closed ranks once again. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a betrayal, one wrapped in tradition, protected by protocol, and weaponized with silence. And Harry knew that by revealing it, he was lighting a match inside Buckingham Palace. But he also believed the silence was more dangerous than the truth. Because a monarchy built on deception cannot hold the trust of a nation. And as the world gasped, the palace said nothing. But silence only fueled the fire. As the world demanded answers, Buckingham Palace did what it always does, nothing. But this time, nothing said everything. The moment Prince Harry's revelations hit the airwaves, the global media machine went into overdrive. Headlines screamed betrayal. Pundits speculated. Reporters circled the gates of royal estates like vultures sensing something far more dangerous than scandal uncertainty. Yet, from the monarchy, there came no denial, no confirmation, no acknowledgement, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't protect, it provokes. In a world accustomed to instant responses and unfiltered truths, the palace's refusal to engage looked less like dignity and more like evasion. Public reactions split down the middle. Some saw Harry as reckless, airing the family's wounds for personal gain. Others hailed him as a whistleblower, finally breaking the monarchy's centuries-old code of concealment. In cafes, online forums, and talk shows, the debate raged. Was Harry the lost son turned traitor, or the only one brave enough to speak the truth? Every unanswered question only deepened the divide. Trust, once a silent contract between crown and country, began to fray under the weight of modern expectations. Inside royal circles, the silence masked turmoil. Prince William, once Harry's closest confidant, was reportedly livid. Sources close to the family claimed he saw Harry's disclosures not as catharsis, but as betrayal. Their relationship, once unbreakable, now stood cold and distant. They had survived grief, war, and scrutiny together. But this was different. This was public, and that made it unforgivable. The royal brand, long built on discretion and stability, suddenly appeared brittle. What once felt timeless now seemed outdated. In the age of transparency, the palace's strategy of silence was interpreted as guilt. The public, once enchanted by the mystique of monarchy, began asking harder questions. Why was the truth so difficult to find? Why were basic answers cloaked in centuries of formality and restraint? Why did the institution seem more invested in protecting its image than addressing the pain within its own family? The fallout stretched far beyond headlines. Polls began to shift. Confidence in the monarchy wavered. Younger generations, already skeptical, grew louder in their criticism. The idea that the royal family could stand above the fray, untouched by modern pressures, was no longer tenable. In trying to preserve the illusion of perfection, the palace had made itself look indifferent, even complicit. And yet, through all of this, no statement came. No televised address. No handwritten note, just silence. And in that silence, the monarchy didn't just lose control of the narrative, it lost a piece of its soul. But amid the chaos, one question remained. Was this revenge, or a cry for healing? Is Harry trying to destroy the monarchy, or is he fighting to save the truth? That question haunts every word he's spoken since stepping away from the royal fold. Because beneath the interviews, the revelations, and the headlines lies a man still wrestling with wounds that never fully healed. Long before Meghan entered his life, Harry carried the scars of watching his mother, Princess Diana, suffer under the same institution he was born to serve. He saw how the palace silenced her. He saw how the media vilified her. And worst of all, he saw how no one within the family protected her when it mattered most. That trauma didn't fade with time, it hardened. It lingered in his bones, waiting for history to repeat itself. And when Meghan began to walk that same lonely path, something inside Harry snapped. He watched her struggle not just with headlines or expectations, but with something deeper: isolation, anxiety, the slow erosion of identity beneath the weight of royal protocol. She told him she didn't want to live. And in that moment, he didn't see his wife. He saw his mother, alone, cornered, crying for help in a palace full of locked doors. It was the breaking point. Not because he wanted to fight the monarchy, but because he realized it might never protect the people he loved. Not unless someone forced it to change. Harry's story, for most of his life, was shaped by one title: the spare, the backup plan, the second son. He smiled for cameras, saluted for his country, played the role written for him, but underneath the uniform and ceremony, he felt invisible. Every decision, every milestone was weighed against a future he would never lead. It wasn't envy, it was erosion. The constant reminder that his presence mattered less than his proximity to power. And for a while, he bore it, until silence turned into suffocation. Critics say Harry is vengeful, that his exposés are payback for a life he couldn't control, that he's punishing a family that gave him everything. But supporters see something else entirely: a man risking everything to tell the truth. A man tired of smiling through pain, tired of watching the same system chew up the people he loves and spit them out for the sake of appearance. To them, Harry isn't dismantling tradition, he's demanding accountability. Not out of hate, but out of heartbreak. There is no clean line between justice and vengeance when you're confronting the people who raised you. Every word feels like a betrayal, every silence a wound. Harry's motives may be tangled, but his emotions are painfully clear. He's not at war with the crown, he's at war with the silence that killed his mother, nearly destroyed his wife, and kept him from ever fully belonging. But even in betrayal, there is hope. Because every family, royal or not, has the chance to heal. The monarchy may survive this scandal, but will the father and son ever find their way back to each other? Across the Atlantic, Harry has carved out a new life, a life defined not by crown and duty, but by freedom and peace. Yet even in the golden light of California, shadows remain. The emotional cost of breaking away from the only world he's ever known continues to echo in ways not even Harry anticipated. The laughter of his children, the quiet calm of his home, the privacy he once craved, they all exist alongside an ache that hasn't gone away. Because family isn't so easily left behind, especially when it's fractured rather than finished. Meghan has become his constant, his partner, his confidant, his anchor in a world still learning to understand him. But she's also his shield. Her presence draws the fire, absorbs the criticism, and bears the burden of being blamed for the rift. Harry knows it, and he hates it. But it only strengthens his resolve. If he couldn't protect his mother, he will protect his wife. If he couldn't change the system from within, he will challenge it from the outside. But even as he moves forward, there's one door that hasn't fully closed, one wound that hasn't fully healed. Reconciliation isn't impossible, but it won't come easily. There are moments ahead that might force a reckoning. The birth of a royal child, the passing of another monarch, or the simple gravity of time. Grief has a way of cracking open even the most fortified walls. And when the next chapter in the royal saga begins, whatever form it takes, there may be space for Harry and Charles to meet again. Not as prince and king, but as father and son. Prince William could be the bridge or the final barrier. His loyalty to the crown is unwavering. His silence, deafening. But beneath the protocol, he too carries the same pain, the same loss, the same memories of a mother gone too soon, and a family pulled apart in the aftermath. If reconciliation is to happen, it will begin not in public, but in private. Not with statements, but with soft words spoken behind closed doors. The kind only brothers can offer each other when the rest of the world stops watching. And then, there's the memory of Queen Elizabeth, a woman who held the monarchy together with grace, patience, and quiet strength. Her legacy doesn't live only in palaces or ceremonies. It lives in the expectation that her family, fractured though it may be, will remember what it means to serve with dignity. That unity is not found in titles, but in love. She would have wanted peace, not for the institution, but for the people inside it. So, what do you think? Has Harry gone too far? Or is he finally doing what his mother never could? Comment below and join the conversation. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.